everyone, to the ComedySportz Podcast with your host, Christine Rollo Capriolo. Today's special guest speaks the speech trippingly on the tongue. It's Ruth Jumping Jack Jenkins.
Welcome back, my wonderful listeners. So good to have you here. We have a really super fun episode. We're going to learn about how improv can save the world. I'm Christine Rollo Capriolo, and today I have Ruth Jumping Jack Jenkins. Ruth, thanks for coming.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to finally talk to you all about improv. So I want to start, though, with where were you born and raised?
I was born in Middletown, Ohio.
Okay.
And I lived there for about 7 years, and then we moved to Oregon. Okay. And we lived in Eugene, Oregon for 3 years. Then we moved back to Ohio, and then we moved to Colorado. And I went junior high, high school, and undergraduate in Colorado.
Was there parents with a job moving you all over?
My father, who was a wonderful man, but always thought the grass was going to be greener somewhere else. And so that's how that happened.
Oh, okay. So just kept trying new places.
Yeah, which, the good thing about it, I was talking to my husband the other day, and I said, you know what, that really enabled me to make friends easily.
Yeah.
Because I had to.
Yeah.
I had to keep doing it.
Right.
And that worked out nicely.
Oh, that's good. Are you still friends with some people from Colorado?
Oh, yes, many.
Oh,
many
excellent.
From Colorado, for sure.
Oh, excellent. So then in Colorado, you said you went to college there as well?
Yes, I went to undergraduate degree at the University of Colorado at Boulder.
And what did you study?
Theater.
Theater.
I did. They also have a really great, the University of Colorado has the Colorado Shakespeare Festival.
Okay.
Which also gave me the chance to perform at that. And I loved it.
You love Shakespeare?
I do love Shakespeare.
Give me your favorite play.
Oh, man, that's tough. Let's see. I love As You Like It as a comedy.
Yeah.
And I love, I'm going to say it out loud.
Are you going to say it?
I'm going to say the M word.
Uh-oh.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to say that I love Macbeth.
Ah, jeez.
What
I hear
have I
that's
done?
a big curse to actually say the word.
That's what they say, but I've said it many times.
And you have to go outside now and spin in a circle and spit or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Throw something over my shoulder.
I like salt.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully the ghost of Macbeth won't attack us while we're doing this this interview here. So you did your undergrad in Colorado. Was there grad school?
There was later,
Okay.
but not in theater.
Uh-huh.
So I did theater professionally for about 5 years, worked at a couple of different theaters in Colorado and California. And then later, after I was married, I went back to post-bac school in speech pathology.
Oh, and we're going to get to that.
Right.
We have a lot of cool stories about that.
So,
but before you get to post-grad here,
right.
What year are we talking where you graduated in theater and started doing theater?
85.
85. Okay. Then how did you come across improv?
So actually did a little bit of improv in college. We had a woman who came from New York, and she taught mask work. So that was my original kind of introduction, like commedia type work.
What's mask work? What?
Commedia dell'arte, the sort of Italian Renaissance art that came out of the Renaissance. And so she brought her own masks and taught this class, and we each wore masks, several different ones at different times, and created characters based on the mask we were wearing, and then just did improv scenes. And so that was a cool class. We did it publicly a couple of times.
Was it comedy or was it just straight?
It was,
or could have been? Or?
It could be either.
Okay.
It was whatever came up in the course of what you were doing.
Okay.
So did a little bit of that. And then after I moved to California, which I did to pursue acting, I was in a children's theater company there. And Jeff Kramer, who started the San Jose ComedySportz, and Patrick Short, who was his general manager, opened their first show there. Mm-hmm. And because Jeff was also in that children's theater, Patrick had been too, wasn't at that time, but Jeff still was. And Jeff invited us all to come and see it on its opening night. So we went and had a great time.
And what was the show?
It was ComedySportz.
Oh, it was. Oh,
yeah.
I'm still thinking children's theater. So you're saying they invited you to the ComedySportz show. Got it.
Right, because he started ComedySportz there. And so a bunch of us went to see it, had a great time. I actually volunteered as, an audience volunteer. And in those days, believe it or not, they did 5 things twice in the show.
I heard that.
So 5 things before intermission.
Right.
And then again after, and the after was with an audience volunteer.
That's insane. That's a lot of things.
It's a lot of things. And, but we did it for a while. In any case, I was the audience volunteer, and it just so happened that I got all 5 things.
You did?
I
Oh, so
did.
the audience volunteer is the guesser?
Exactly. The guesser. Believe it or not.
No way.
And I think they were pretty shocked. I was quite shocked, as a matter of fact. So anyway.
Can you remember any of the things?
No. Okay, I'm going to say one of them was basketball.
Basketball. Okay.
But I have no idea what else was connected.
But were they like really hard, or did they make them
They
easy?
were not. No,
Okay.
they were not that hard. Certainly not as hard as what the...
Right. So maybe like basketball instead of a basketball, a watermelon. Like that was
Yeah,
it? Okay.
right. Or like a couple of things, but not really intense
But still,
stuff.
for an audience volunteer who doesn't do improv to come up and be the guesser, I thought you'd be miming and helping with that. You'd guess them.
I guessed, yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Well played.
Right. And so that was how I knew that I had to give that a try. So then I started taking workshops immediately thereafter.
Okay.
And that was in the fall. And then I started playing in the winter of that next year. So
Of like 86?
So 88, because this was 87 when this happened.
Okay.
And then, I had lived in California for about a year before I moved down to the Bay Area, where I started, hooking up with these folks. So
Nice.
Yeah.
And they remain lifelong friends,
absolutely.
including one remains a little more than friends. You ended up marrying Mr. Patrick Short.
That is true.
Tell me about that.
Well, so, we were playing comedy sports together and got to know each other pretty well.
So you're both on the team at this point,
Exactly.
performing together. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And we started dating, and
Did you hold hands?
we did hold hands.
Oh.
I'll tell you the funniest thing. We started dating, and not that long into it, maybe a month or so.
Yeah.
I'm going to give Pat up here. I hope he enjoys this. He walked me out to the parking garage of the place that we had been performing.
Okay.
It's a parking garage across the street. And he looked at me and he said, I am really starting to fall for you.
Oh.
And I looked up at him, and I just had this amazing premonition, if you will, that he would ask me to marry him someday and that I would say yes.
Aww.
Now, mind you, prior to this time, I was convinced that I would never be a married person. I just didn't think I was going to do that.
Yeah.
But I looked at him and had that sensation, and it freaked me out so badly that I'm like, okay, gotta go. See you later. And jumped in my car and sped back to my home in Santa Cruz. It was really something. And as it turned out, it was true. It took
Did
a
he
while
ever
beyond
say,
that.
like, what the heck was that? Why did you bolt after I...
No, I think he knew.
Okay.
But
It all worked out.
Yeah. So that's how that came to be. And we had a really great time getting to know each other through comedy sports. I mean, that was a lot of what we did.
Right.
And made such strong friends there. And that's who we hung out with.
Well, and then you two ended up leaving San Jose
We did.
to open Portland?
Correct. So we got married in 1990, and we were in San Jose for another 2 years.
Okay.
And during that time is when I started going back for my post-bac. So I went to San Jose State for my post-bac in speech-language pathology.
Okay.
And then after I finished those 2 years, and Pat recognized that he was also doing day work in the tech industry, and he recognized that things in that job were not going where he wanted them to go. And also, San Jose was an expensive place to live. It still is. Yeah. And we went up to visit his sister in Portland, and we just started looking at some houses, and it was like, oh, we could buy a house here now. We could definitely do that.
Just on a whim, you started looking at houses on your visit.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we kind of knew that was a place of interest for us.
Okay.
And then one of his customers basically offered him a job. And so then we moved up to Portland.
Oh, my gosh.
Bought a house almost right away. My wonderful sister-in-law, Anne, who really, because of her job, was really had the pulse of the community, knew what was going on, and said to us, if you don't buy a house now, you might find it difficult.
You'll
in the
miss
near
your
future.
chance. Yeah.
So she took us out looking for houses the first week we moved up there. So we were living in an apartment. We started looking at houses. We actually bought the first house that we looked at, although in the interim, I looked at 35 other houses because I'm like that. Pat did not look at all of them. I wrote down which ones he should look at, and we went back and looked at a few. But it turned out the first one was the best.
First one was the one.
It was the one.
And you've been there ever since?
And we've been there ever since.
And that was 1992. 92.
Right.
Okay.
So
and had you finished your degree then?
No. So then I had to go. So I finished my post back, but I started at San Jose State. So I worked for a year so that I could get in-state tuition.
Oh, okay.
And I actually worked as a speech language assistant for Head Start.
Okay.
And so I did that for a year while I was taking a few classes. And then I did 2 full years to get my master's degree. And then I've been working in speech pathology for 29 years.
Where did that come from for you? You majored in theater in undergrad. Where did this desire to do speech pathology come from?
So after having been an actor for about 5 years and recognizing what a hard row it is to hoe and thinking, I don't know that I can do this as a profession and own a house and have children, which was a big thing for me.
Yeah.
I really wanted to have children. So that was the initial impetus. And when I started thinking about it, I had a secretarial job back in Boulder before I left there that was working for the Center for People with Disabilities in Boulder. And I really enjoyed the population of people I was seeing there. Mm-hmm. And one of my friends at one point had said to me, if you do want to transition to something, it seems like speech therapy, as they called it then, would be the thing because you've got all this background in voice and just communication skills because acting and improv are so much about communication. And so I looked into it. I followed a speech pathologist around for a couple of days and saw what she did and thought, yeah, that's definitely something I can do. So
that's it.
That's how that happened.
Oh, that's great. We have a little experience in our household with a speech therapist. Our son, who's 15 now, when he was little, he just wouldn't talk. He just kept going, making these like back of the throat, like quacks almost.
Right.
We ended up making like picture charts, like, do you want this or this? And he could point and he just wouldn't speak. And so at our pediatrician's office, at his 2-year checkup, he was like, oh, let's try some speech therapy. And 2 weeks, and he just hasn't stopped talking since. I mean, it's just something opened up in him. And I mean, he could understand things. He knew how to communicate with us. The lady came in to do what would you call it? Assessment. And she said to Nelson, our son, something like, can you go put this away or go find a cracker or something? I don't know. And he immediately went to the kitchen. He opened a drawer. He got a bowl. Then he went to the pantry. He got a box of crackers. He opened them. He poured them in. He came back. I mean, he could do it. He could understand but I don't know. He just wasn't talking. He was quacking. And then
that is interesting.
Yeah. And then, I don't know, 2 weeks of work with her and he hasn't stopped talking yet.
That's perfect. Yeah. Some children, I don't know what it is that ignites them, that
I don't know.
That flips that switch and that all of a sudden actual words start coming out.
Right.
I had seen a couple of children like that, although I don't know that I ever had someone who graduated, if you want to say that, in 2 weeks. That's pretty fast. It clearly was something just needed to. So it wasn't really something that was keeping him from doing it.
We don't know. It just suddenly opened up all of a sudden, and he was just like, "Hello, mother. How are you?"
Right.
It just hasn't stopped. So, I mean, I admire the work. It's fascinating. I don't know how she opened him up in two weeks, but that's all it took. I mean, it was amazing.
That's great.
So I know within your work, you use improv, right, to combine it in your therapy to help people. Can you talk about that? I think that's fascinating.
Sure. So when I first got out of my graduate program, it was very hard. I really wanted to work in a medical setting, and I really kind of wanted to work with people with neurological issues. But when I first got out of school, it was very hard to find a placement as a new graduate in that.
Well, let me stop you. Why? Why did you want to work with people with neurological issues?
I think my first experience at the Center for People with Disabilities in Boulder, because I worked when I was following this woman around and I ended up doing some volunteering there.
Okay.
It was with adults, and many of them had head injuries. Some of them had just a variety of neurological conditions. And honestly, when I was in grad school, my other thought was to do voice work because I thought, it would be cool to become like a voice coach and work with actors and singers. But I looked at that and I thought, living in Portland, that's a pretty niche market for Portland. There are people now, there's a big voice center there, but then there really wasn't. And I also, honestly, I'm not a strong enough singer myself to guide somebody who's a singer through that.
Right.
And I felt like professionally, that's where a lot of it was going to be. And so I thought, that's not for me. So then the whole neurological patients kind of thing. And when I did my, when you're in graduate school, you then do some fellowships.
Yeah.
Internships. And so I did a couple of those, and I did some in the public schools and I did some at a couple of different medical settings. And I just really liked the ones in the medical setting. I felt that's where I was at more.
Yeah.
And also when I was in graduate school, some of the children who came in, because we had to do clinics and they would bring the kids in. And I actually did some improv games with some of those kids. And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a quick story about that.
Yeah.
I think my very first little guy that I ever worked with, I'll call him Billy. Billy was seeing me for a while. Cute, adorable little guy, adopted little boy who's all of the kids in his family were adopted. His parents were doing an amazing job, and they had purposefully adopted kids who had issues. And this little boy, I think, he had been born to a mother who had an addiction problem. And so he had a couple of different issues going on, and he wasn't speaking very much. And he was 3 when he came to see me. So I was doing a lot of things with him, but some of it I framed in improv games, which he really loved. And of course, they were very basic improv games because he was 3.
Oh, like what? Can you remember what you're playing?
I remember doing a version of What Are You Doing?
Okay.
Because that was an easy thing for him to follow. Yeah. So that was definitely one of them. But at any rate, his mother came home, and his mom would always say to him at night, he would come in or in the morning and jump on their bed. Yeah. And she'd always say, "Who loves you, Billy?" And he would say, "Mommy or Daddy," or whoever was present. Those were some of his, of course, first words. And one day he came running in, jumped up on the bed, and she goes, "Who loves you, Billy?" And he goes, "Whoops." And that was his name for me because he couldn't say Ruth yet. Oh. And he said, "Whoops." And she told me that, and she goes, "What are you doing with my kid?" So it was pretty fun. So I used some improv with children, and definitely when I did my internship at a high school before I graduated, I did a lot of improv with those kids, and they totally dug it. I mean, we got a lot accomplished in a short period of time because of the buy-in. You could just get people to do what you wanted because it was fun.
Well, when you say you got a lot accomplished, what were you seeing? What were these results?
So these were kids who a lot of them were problems with social language, so being able to connect on a social language that your peers didn't reject you. I definitely had those children, and I also had children who still had, at that age, articulation issues and language issues. So I just worked it around various different games, and so that all of them could play, and whatever their issues were, it could be addressed one way or another. So I did that and really found that was successful. And when I say buy-in, you can only do so much with kids with showing them articulation cards and, playing these little games that you get from these speech companies. I mean, they'll do that for a while, but it gets old pretty quickly. And the thing with improv is that you just have such a wild, vast array of things that are linguistic that make sense. And so, they'll do them because they're fun and new and challenging, and they are not stuck in a rut of doing the same thing over and over.
Right. Can you give me another example of a game that you were playing in high school?
Yeah. The high school kids. Day in the Life. They loved that because they got to talk about things in their own life, like someone would give the suggestions, one of the students, and the others would act it out. And they loved that because it was their day being presented. Yeah. And even though it would get totally skewed by the improv, they loved that. That was a really fun
So this
one.
was group work. You weren't doing one-on-one individual sessions?
Right. I did do some individual sessions, but not so much in high school. In high school, it was mostly classes. I would have a whole class full of kids.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In fact, I don't know that I saw at that high school too many one-on-ones. I think we had one young woman for articulation issues. Oh, I know. Rhyming games. So games that looked at the sound that they have problems with and coming up with rhymes for words that had those sounds in them.
Oh my gosh.
I do remember doing that with her and doing that
Okay.
with some other kids. Yeah.
And then you saw kids improve with these games.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's fantastic. So then you go back to Comedy Sportz on the weekend and you're like, I just fixed a class of kids. Look at me.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that, but yes. I mean, I have a lot of feelings about how you do improv, and we can get into that more later when we talk about the sort of holistic use of these games as a speech language device.
Well, talk about
Unless
it
you
now.
want to talk about it
yeah,
now.
No, I want to know. This
jumping
is
ahead a little bit
fascinating.
in time. So let me explain a little bit more what I've done in the interim.
Okay.
So I got out of school and worked in 2 elementary schools
Okay.
for my first year out. It was something else. I had 72 kids on my caseload,
gosh.
which you're not supposed to have that many, but I did.
So 72 kids were assessed and recognized as having some sort of speech issue.
Right. And these
Okay.
were kids that I inherited from the woman who had just retired.
Okay.
And then new kids that I brought on as I
Sure. Mm-hmm.
started there. It was a lot. And I mostly had them in groups. There were a very few handful of kids that I had individually, but mostly it was in groups, mostly 2 to 4 children in a group. And then I also teamed with the person who was the learning specialist. And sometimes we would do things together.
Okay.
So, for example, one time we did a word at a time story because the kids came from, let's say they were all 5th graders and they were studying some particular thing in history.
Sure.
And so we would take, because the goal at that point was really in speech language, especially in language, was to use whatever they were learning in their classrooms as part of their therapy.
Okay.
So it wasn't just this, oh my gosh, now I've been pulled out and missed 20, 30 minutes of
Right.
my history. Instead, the teacher could send something along. The teachers that I could talk into it would send something along that told me what they were talking about, and we would go there. So then sometimes in the learning specialist classroom, we would combine, and I would be giving them the words, the vocabulary words that the teacher had sent along.
Okay.
And they would play something like Word at a Time story or Dr. Know-It-All or some kind of
Yeah.
expert story where
Yeah.
they have to say everything that they know about that.
Oh, fantastic.
And one of the best experiences I had with that was recording the kids and then giving it back to the teacher, and they would play it. And so I had both that group. I had a bunch of different groups going on, and one of them was for kids who were dysfluent, so children who have stuttering issues. And I had in one group, I happened to have a brother and a sister, because they were the only kids in that school at that time who had that issue. And I didn't want to group them necessarily with other kids because that didn't make sense to me. But they were willing to be grouped together, and they were in different grades. And we did just a huge variety of games because for them, the content or the rules of the games didn't matter so much. It was literally putting them under some kind of linguistic pressure and practicing where they were under linguistic pressure but weren't around their peers.
Yeah.
So that it wasn't multiple kinds. It was linguistic pressure but not social pressure.
Okay.
And so we played several different kinds of games, and I asked them to pick one that they liked the best toward the end of the year and said, would you like to take this to your classrooms and do it in front of your classmates? And they said yes. And we did one game for one, which was some version of story.
Okay.
And we took it into their classroom, and the kids loved it so much that they started teaching them to play it at recess.
Oh my God.
And then they came back to me and said, can we do this like for our whole 3rd grade? Because they had those open classrooms.
Okay.
Yeah. And so so we went back in and they did it with a bunch of their classmates and played a couple rounds of it. And it was just really fun.
Well, now, how many teachers did you end up training on different improv games to use in their classroom? Was that a thing?
Not as many as I would have liked to,
Yeah.
because there's always the time issue and
course.
the paperwork. And with 72 kids, it was overwhelming.
Yeah.
So I would say definitely the learning disabilities specialist, and then maybe 3 other teachers who really were strongly interested in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a teacher. I don't know if you know that. I'm a high school art teacher.
I did know.
And just listening to you right now, I'm like, oh man, why aren't I bringing games into the room where the kids could play instead of me just standing on the table and singing and dancing at them? They should be doing that.
Yeah.
So that's making me think. I love that. I mean, I know speech pathology is your main goal. I mean, helping these kids to overcome and to get better at their speech issues. I don't know the correct way of saying that. But boy, you could just open up everybody just to learning. I mean, right? I mean, you're seeing that when kids are excited about what they're doing instead of just flashcards in your office, they're like boring.
Right.
When you're giving them an improv game to do and they're excited and then they want to play it with their friends on the playground, all kids are going to benefit from this.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And so I got a lot out of that, really enjoyed it. And then after a year of working in the schools, that was enough of schools. Not,
Gee, why?
Yeah. Just kidding. Right. I loved almost all of those kids. Like, I really enjoyed working with them. Certainly enjoyed the improv, but just every aspect of working with kids I really enjoyed, except that it was such a high caseload and
that's a lot.
Right. And the
That's a
IEPs
lot.
that you have to do
Yes,
for kids
the
in school,
IEP paperwork
so
is
much
gonna-
paperwork.
yeah.
And it burnt me out
I can understand
quite
that.
quickly.
Yeah.
And because I knew that I really had this goal of working more with neurological.
Right. So how did you make that
disorders.
transition then?
So at the end of that year, there was a job that came open in a hospital really close to where we live. And I was like, I had wanted to work there.
Yeah.
And one of my graduate instructors and his wife, some of the graduate instructor's wife, worked there. And she told me about it. And she said, let's get you an interview. And I did. And they hired me. And at first I was a float, which means you go anywhere they send you.
Okay.
So it was really a little erratic, but good. It was really good experience because it helped me to understand what I really wanted to do the most. So I worked a lot in the hospital setting, and mostly in the hospital and in outpatient, where I was seeing everybody individually, and there really wasn't a great opportunity to do improv-related stuff because it was very medical.
Yeah.
And a lot of swallowing therapy, which is one of the things we do. People don't often realize that speech pathologists cover swallowing issues.
therapy?
Yeah, so for people who've had certain kinds of strokes, definitely people with Parkinson's disease and a number of other neurological progressive diseases, they'll develop problems swallowing.
Oh my.
As do many people with dementia. And so I did a lot of swallowing therapy in the hospital. I did have, I will say, when I was working on this one particular unit, which is the rehab unit, where people would stay a little longer, we had a young man who fell off a cliff. Both he and his dad fell off a cliff into the ocean. And they both survived it, but the young man was head injured. And so he was like in his... he's maybe 18, 19. So he came to the rehab unit, and his mom told me how much he loved doing theater. And so I thought, I'm just going to try some of these games with him.
Yeah.
And we did try a variety of things. I know you're going to ask me what it was, and I know I'm going to have a hard time to. Oh, I know. And anything that
You're going to ask me a detail.
Right. And I am old, so there's that. But anything that involves a lot of naming.
Okay.
Like multiple naming of things. And so we did a lot of those kinds of games, and he loved it. And one of the nurses said that was the first time I've seen him smile since he's been here. And so that really opened that for me. And so I said to his mom, when you leave here, you should really consider having him at least going to watch some improv, but also maybe in a little bit start taking some workshops.
I love it.
Yeah. And they moved shortly after that, so out of state. So I don't know exactly where that went, but I thought that would have been a great idea for him.
Yeah. Did you work with the dad too?
No, because oddly, he was in a different hospital.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a reason for that, I'm sure. But I never actually saw the dad. But then, I worked with several other head injured people. So I did work in the hospital and outpatient settings for a while. And then at that same time, I also worked with children one-on-one, and I did a few improv things with them. They were very young children, mostly preschoolers, and I know I did a few improv games with them, especially with that articulation piece and coming up with multiple words that have the sounds in them, but doing it in ways that's not just flashcards.
Right.
And so I did that, and then the same friend of mine that told me about this job had started working in home health for the same organization, Providence. They're in Portland. And so in the meantime, I had my first child, and that was awesome, but it made the float work difficult because you never knew how much work you were going to have and how much daycare you needed.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh, because your hours would change with
Yeah,
that. Okay.
exactly. And so she told me about this job in home health, and she was about to have her first baby, and I covered for her while she was gone. Really liked it. She came back, but then after about 6 months, they moved. And so then I took her job in home health.
Okay. And that was more reliable hours.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And so I did home health for like 18 years. And I will say, I feel like I'm a pretty good judge of character with people. And part of that comes out of improv and knowing how to talk to individuals for who they are.
Yeah.
So I would meet individuals who I could tell immediately were some combination of very highly educated and standoffish.
Okay.
And those people I knew I had to approach in a particular way to meet their level. Because even if a person's had a stroke, they've had a head injury, and their language is not intact or entirely intact, but you can tell these things about them, you want to make sure, really sure, that they don't feel demeaned by anything that you do with them. And so that person might be an entirely different approach than like a grandma who loves little kids and loves to play and is very playful kind of person. And so I always picked, to be quite honest with you, who I would do improv kinds of things with.
Okay.
And there's also the piece, when you are seeing somebody, you need to meet their goals. And you ask them what their goals are from the get-go.
Yeah.
And that's what you're about, is meeting their goals.
Right.
And if improv works into that, great. But there are some people whom that's not going to work for.
Sure, of
and
course.
you know when to use it and when not to.
Yeah.
And I learned that early on. And I certainly did some of that in home health. And I can tell you one of the people I had most success with, again, was a younger person. And he was also a head injured person. He had a very, very hardcore head injury. When I first met him, he could not initiate anything. He would sit in a chair all day long. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't change. I don't believe he'd get up to go to the bathroom if somebody didn't prompt him. I mean, he was very head injured and very young, like 22. And he started making some pretty good recovery physically rather quickly, so they moved him out of home health. So I really did not work with him for very long. And I did not do improv when I saw him because he had very basic needs that had to be met. So he goes on, he does a ton of speech therapy. He moves into a group home and is doing really well there. And the speech therapist there was somebody that I got to know. And I said, oh, I think I've worked with one of your people. And we talked about that. And she said, would you do an improv group for this whole head injury community? And so we actually had them come over to ComedySportz.
Oh, nice.
I think there were 8 of them.
Okay.
And some of them were traumatic brain injuries. Some of them were strokes. But they were an interesting group of people. And I just have to tell you my favorite story. So that young man was in this group, and he really got it. And he was fearless, and he would get up and do anything.
Oh, great.
And by then, his speech and language had progressed
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
Like his memory was still challenged. And so some of the games that we did that involved a lot of memory were a huge challenge for him, but he liked it.
Okay.
But there was another young man in that group who also had injured. And I had asked my friend to tell me what some of the goals that she had for people were. And for this guy, it was like he talks about himself nonstop. And pretty much that's the only thing he talks about. And he'll tell you the same things over and over and over. And so I thought about that, and I thought, what game could I use to get him to not go there?
Right.
And oh dear, of course I'm going to forget the name of that game. Hype Man.
Hype Man. What's that?
Hype Man. So in Hype Man, you have one person who's telling about something, and you might get an audience volunteer for that in the course of a show. So one person is telling you about something that they enjoy doing. And another person is interviewing them, so asking the questions. And then a third person is the hype man. And the hype man, as in the rap world, hypes what they've said. So whatever they talk about, after a few seconds, the question's been asked, they answer the question, and then the hype man hypes how well they do at that thing. So there was a young woman, also head injured, and her skill that she wanted to talk about was playing the violin, because she'd grown up playing violin, and it was very challenging for her now because her hands weren't working the same, but she wanted to talk about playing the violin. So another staff member was the interviewer. They were asking the questions. She was answering it as best she could, and then this guy who only ever talked about himself was the hype man. So she said something to start with, like she asked her, well, how long do you practice a day? And she said, maybe 20, 30 minutes. And she had a very quiet voice. She was a very quiet person. Maybe 20, 30 minutes. And then the hype man comes on and he's like, she is too modest. She practices 2-3 hours a day and she is amazing at it. She never hits a wrong note. And he's just going on and everybody's staring at him. And it went on. I mean, there were probably 6 questions asked of her, and everything she said, he came up with something different.
Really?
And totally focused on her.
Nice.
And it was amazing. And afterwards, his staff member said to him, that was so beautiful. Every time you meet up with somebody, you should think about doing that, listening to what they say. And even if you don't totally hype it, maybe you be the interviewer. Maybe you ask the more questions and hype the things that you hear that are good. And I talked to her about 6 months later and she said, yeah, he's doing much more of that. He's become so much more conversational now. And we're using that game with everybody at home. And we taught various games, of course, during the day. And she said, yeah, we're using it on our weekend time that we have free, and we get together and do that. We're going to try to put on a little show together.
I love it.
Yeah. So I think that was my first really big aha moment with the neuro folks that I work with.
Yeah.
And so then I did it as much as I could in a sort of limited way in home health. But then, are you ready for me to continue, or did you want to ask me anything else?
Go ahead, keep going.
I will just keep going if you let me.
Well, I was going to ask, hold on. I was going to ask, so you are teaching all these games to your patients, improv games. Have the patients, has anybody taught you something about improv that you've brought back now when you perform? Is there something like a moment for you, a light bulb moment where you're like, whoa?
I definitely think I've been taught about, not like taught a thing to do, like a game or something, but I've definitely been taught about slowing down. Because in case you couldn't tell here, I do tend to talk rather fastly, and sometimes I just move through moments too quickly. And that is something as an improviser that I've tried to learn to not do.
Interesting.
So yeah, I would say that's one of the bigger things that I've learned from those folks for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a good question. Thank you for saying that.
Well, you're welcome. So continue. What were you going to say? You went on to...
So then I went on to working after the 18 years in home health, I got a job at a place called Elder Place, also owned by Providence. Elder Place is a very interesting program, and I met a woman when I was at a conference who was a speech pathologist for them, and she said, well, I'm going to be retiring in about a year, and we need some people to do some float work for us. So I started doing that so I could kind of get my foot in the door and see what it was like. So Elder Place is what's called the PACE at Home model, which exists in many states, and it's people who are eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid. Mm-hmm. They have to be 55, and they have to have one or more disabling conditions.
Okay.
And they have to, as I said, qualify for Medicaid, which means that they are on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum.
Right.
So we take these people in their benefits, their Medicaid and Medicare benefits are consigned to Elder Place, and Elder Place provides them everything at one place. So we have the physicians, nurses, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, social workers, chaplains, everything they need. And so they get all their services by just coming to one place, so they don't have to go all over the place. And we help them find housing. So our social workers are very connected to the people who run assisted living settings and memory care settings, and what we have a lot of in Oregon, which are adult foster care homes. Oh. So those are our people. So those people, when I first started, I was seeing most of them individually, but only briefly did I do that because I noticed that the other speech pathologists also had groups. So I thought that's where I'm going with them. Not all of them, but with a number of them. Right. So I worked when I first started, I had 3 different settings, and I started groups in all of them. And started doing improv in those groups. And the pandemic changed that. It was terrible. Like we couldn't even have people come in at all for like almost 2 years.
Yeah.
And then when we did start having people come in, they didn't want me to see them in groups, which was fine. But now I'm back to doing groups.
Okay.
So I have 2 settings where I'm doing groups. And in each setting, I have a Parkinson's group and a post-stroke, or what I call an aphasia group. Aphasia is the language disturbance that people often have where they have word-finding problems. It's also, there's more to aphasia than that. They often have problems with reading and writing and with reception of language. So those 2 different groups. And also, so my Parkinson's groups are based primarily on problems with voicing, although also cognition.
Okay.
So then I have a few people in the Parkinson's groups who have voice problems, even though they don't have Parkinson's. But they have a similar style of voicing issue, which is where they start to just really lose their vocal volume. But they also, a lot of them have word finding problems. They often tell me that. So, I do some games, as with the stuttering that I did with kids, the voice stuff, you could do anything. It doesn't really matter because all you're working on is being loud enough in a variety of contexts. So I'll come in with those folks and I'll do the exercises that I normally do with Parkinson's folks to get them started. So relaxation and breathing and some vocal volume exercises. But then you always want to do some things that aren't just about exercise because you want them to maintain the vocal volume in some other context that pushes their cognition. Because when we have a conversation with somebody, conversation is improv, right? It's always going to be whatever comes up.
Right.
And because those people, that's when their volume tanks because they're thinking about what they're going to say, and thinking about volume at the same time is very challenging.
Yeah.
So then I'm doing these improv games that have the challenge to them, and they still have to stay loud throughout it. And I have a sound level meter in front of them so that they can see when they're dropping.
Okay.
And if they don't see that because they get so lost in what they're doing, which they commonly do, then I just cue them for volume. But yeah, that's kind of how that goes.
Wow.
And you know what I really love about almost all comedy sports games involve divergent thinking. So the ability to think about one thing and say another, or be talking and moving at the same time, which is very important for these post-stroke and head injury and Parkinson's folks. So I really enjoy using those games with people.
Have you ever had your troupe go and do something with your patients?
Not yet. I have thought about that, but I'll tell you what I have done that's close. So when I started at this one setting, which was several of these elder places also own assisted livings. So the assisted living is attached to the clinic, which makes it easy. And so when I first got there, the life enrichment person or activities director asked me if I would be willing, knowing that I had a theater background, to start a theater club. And so I did. And I started one in the other living setting too. And so they did 2 to 3 plays a year. And they held their scripts because I figured that most of them could not memorize, which is very difficult for them. And so as I was doing that, I was also working at the local high school where my daughter was still in school, at Grant High School. My son had gone there too. And I had worked with the thespian groups there, doing, teaching some improv. And then I helped them, prep their stuff for going to Thespian State and whatnot. And I became really close with that group of students. And I said, how would you feel about coming in and helping these seniors with their plays a little bit? You can play some of the younger characters, just small roles, and then help them with props and literally movement and stuff like that. So they did that. And that worked out really well. Well, then when I started doing some improv with the theater club, I brought the kids in to play improv games with them.
Nice.
And I tell you, we had the best time. We did a bunch of improv stuff. We helped them with another play. It was a Thanksgiving play. And my son came over from Idaho. He's in he works for the NBC affiliate in Idaho, but he's got a good background in, he knows how to film things. So he came over and was filming all this stuff that we did and put it together to make a thespian end-of-year project to take to state to win the, teaching kids to do things using their art in the community and something that helps the community. So we made this amazing thing, and that was when the pandemic hit.
COVID.
And for 2 years, thespians didn't happen. I mean, it happened, but it was virtual, and we never got to really do that. And that was too bad. But that's how I mostly worked with bringing a troupe, if you will call it that, into there. Now, Patrick came and did improv with our staff members.
Okay.
So we were doing like an implied improv. I've done that with him a couple times, and he's done it a couple times by himself in the elder place setting.
Sure.
So he comes in and teaches the staff. And one of the most amazing things, we had this big staff event for which they shut the cafeteria so that the participants, the residents, wouldn't be coming in because they wanted this time just for the staff.
Right.
But one of the little residents who had probably pretty significant dementia and also spoke no English. She was a Cantonese speaker. She came in to the cafeteria, just like walked through the door. And instead of like trying to turn her out, we were doing the game of bobsled. And she just came right up and joined on the back of a bobsled without even knowing what she was doing. And then we had the staff help her because she used a walker and we wanted to make sure she was safe. And the medical director of all of Elder Place was there, and she was fascinated and amazed that this woman was willing to do this. And so she started talking to me about what I was doing with people. And I said, well, you should come watch our next production at the theater club. And it will involve a little bit of improv, which it did. And then it was also involving, it was almost like doing one act, but it was scenes from plays and then some very short plays. So she comes to this. And I've got two guys. Let's see, I'll come up with names for them. We'll call them Bob and Bill.
Bob and Bill.
Bob and Bill. Good old Bob and Bill. Bob is a black guy. Bill's a white guy. And they had some issues with each other.
Okay.
And kind of got up in each other's face in the cafeteria sometimes and just in general. But through the course of being in theater club together, that was seeming to kind of mellow out. And when it came time for me to assign people what to do in this program, I put them together because the black guy had been a semi-pro baseball player and he wanted to do Who's on First.
That's great.
So that's what I assigned them to do. And so Bob working with Bill, and apparently, unbeknownst to me, Bob comes up to Bill in the cafeteria one day and says, hey man, I know we don't have to memorize these lines, but Ruth keeps telling me that I'm looking down at the script too much and she wants to see my face. So I want to do better at knowing it really well so I don't have to look down as much. Will you help me?
Nice.
And Bill goes, yeah, I'll help you. And they got together every night after dinner for about 7 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, every night they got together. And so when the medical director came to see this show, at the end of it, I said, I want people to go up and talk to her and tell her what you're getting out of this so that they'll continue to want to have this here. So they this couple of guys walk up to her and she said, well, how do you like doing this? And he told her this story of what they had been doing. And Bob looked at Bill. I'm probably going to start crying here. Bob looked at Bill and he goes, because Bill's my buddy, aren't you? And Bill goes, yeah, man, I'm your buddy.
Oh.
And they stayed really close until Bill passed away here about a year ago. And it was a really beautiful moment of
the power of improv.
Yeah, right.
Look at this.
Yeah, it was a great thing. So,
oh, that's fantastic.
and they actually did a fair amount of improv in it, a lot, because they, like I said, they couldn't really memorize, so they'd go up on things. And I taught them, when you go up, just keep talking. You'll find something and you'll find your way back there.
Yeah.
I just, the point that I was starting to make and that I said I would make later and never did, I want to get back to that.
Oh, sure.
I have never said that improv will fix your speech and language problems. It is trying to have a different approach at drawing out the speech and language issues and practicing them in a way that is somewhere between rote practice and conversation, because conversation is always the end goal. And so that's what I want people to know, is that it's not like, I'm not going to do these games and say, yep, I've fixed them. In fact, I have to be clear to say that in the world that I'm in, there is very little fixing.
Right.
That does not per se happen. It happens with kids a lot. And it happens with adults whose injuries are less severe sometimes. But it's not, it's not a fix. It's teaching people strategies for coping.
Right. It's a tool.
Yeah. And that's what I feel like improv helps to do.
Yeah. Fantastic. So what's your favorite comedy sports game?
Oh, my favorite comedy sports game. Gosh, I need to think about that. I have to say I do love Day in the Life, because I just love, I guess So I love Shakespeare. I guess that's truly, if push came to shove, Shakespeare would be my favorite game. But I love to combine Shakespeare and Day in the Life.
That's a good one, yes.
That's just a really fun combo.
It really is. It's a super fun combination. I love that too. I like to play that with Rolly Cafaro.
Oh, yeah, I'll bet. No
That's
doubt.
fantastic.
Right.
Yeah. Inevitably, he insults my boob size and I insult his manhood size, and it ends up going really well.
It's perfect.
Well, in Shakespeare.
Yeah. Well, we've been fortunate enough to have Rick Stedman from Seattle come down and workshop with us and then do a show with us. And it's just been so much fun. So we do have a Shakesprov group that we pull together periodically. We actually did it online several times, and that was really fun.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Tell me about your nickname. I always like to get the nickname origin story. And I know your nickname is Jumpin' Jack, but I know you had another one too. Tell me about your nicknames.
Yes. So I started out, I don't remember what I very first was, to be honest, but I became Poodlehead, Ruth Poodlehead Jenkins. So we really like our puns to go with the last name. Well, Jenkins is just not an easy name to do with that. And so I, for a while, in the entirety of the late 80s, had permed hair. So like the really, really super curly, fairly long hair.
Yeah.
And I would put it, to get it out of my face, I would put it up in a scrunchie, like a significant amount of it on top of my head. And one time, James Bailey from LA just started calling me Poodlehead, and it stuck.
James Bailey.
Yeah, so I had that for quite a while. And then I cut my hair and stopped perming it because, it wasn't the 80s anymore. And that was not a look. So I cut it, and you know what? I know what it came from. Several people who came to see the show the other night in Milwaukee that we were in noticed that when I play 185, I have this very high energy character thing that I do, and I literally jump up and down throughout whatever 185 joke I'm telling.
Yeah.
And that's where it came from. Jumpin' Jack.
Jumpin' Jack Jenkins. Yep. Fantastic.
Yeah, that was my thing.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to do a quick lightning round here.
Oh, dear God. Okay.
Ready? It'll be quick and painless, I promise. Mm-hmm. So you did your favorite comedy sports game. What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Well, I think it's going to be my new favorite. I'm going to try it tonight.
Oh.
And it's malted milk ball.
Malted milk ball. Mm-hmm, yeah. Very good, very good. Favorite Golden Girl?
I don't know their character names. B. Arthur.
B. Arthur. So as Dorothy.
Dorothy
Spornak.
Dorothy. Uh-huh.
All right. Favorite bird?
Peacock.
Peacock.
I have a peacock motif in my backyard.
Love it. I'm going to lay out some games here before we end.
Okay.
These are all comedy sports games. Take two different games and tell me about the games and which game you'd rather play in a show. Don't worry, we're not going to play it now.
Okay.
But which one you'd rather play in a show?
Oh, radio and audience sound effects. I would say I'd rather play audience sound effects because I have a general preference towards scene games, and audience sound effects involves an audience member, which I love. I absolutely love using audience members.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they love that game.
Yeah.
I mean, I've played it though with some people who forget the goal is to get the audience member to make noises.
Right. So if you're not cueing them to do that, they may not do it.
Right.
Unless you are lucky and have an audience member who just randomly starts doing stuff, which is fun. But yeah, you do have to remember to cue them. For sure. Yeah.
For sure. But you're right. In the scene, bringing them into the scene, that's a lot of fun.
Now that you say that, that's actually a game that I could try with my patients.
Look at that.
I bet they would have so much fun
I will
with
be
that.
presenting at the next speech pathology conference. I will be there. Christine Rollo Capriolo.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm taking over. So one more game.
Okay.
We're going to play a little Would You Rather.
Oh, nice.
Because
that is a game that I do play with my participants, which they
fantastic.
Love. Mm-hmm.
I love this game. I've got so many different cards and such. We're going to just pick two here. Would you rather have a second smaller head attached to the top of your current head, or fall face first into a pile of dog doo?
Oh, I'm going to take the second head for sure. I do not like falling because I'm old, and I do not like dog doo.
I don't know if anybody does.
And I really think if the top head were small enough, it could be covered when you didn't want people to see it.
With like a hat.
By a hat, a scarf, whatever.
Yeah.
But think, like, just having that extra set of eyes to notice things and an extra set of ears, right?
Oh, listen to you. The benefits of having a second head.
And you could have a conversation with yourself when you're bored.
Could. So. But what if you didn't get along with your second head? Now that would be awful.
That would be awkward, for sure.
That would be awkward.
I think you could fix that through some basic therapy. Yeah.
Back to the therapy, Ruth.
Right.
This has been fascinating. I could talk to you all day about this. I love it. And you're getting my brain thinking of different ways I can use improv in my classroom.
Right.
And I really appreciate you coming and sharing your expertise.
You're welcome.
This is awesome. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you for having me.
The ComedySportz Podcast is produced and engineered by Kyle Hanneken. Our announcer is Mr. PJ Rockwell. Feel free to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. Comments and inquiries can be sent to the ComedySportz Podcast at gmail.com. Created and hosted by me, Christine Rollo Capriolo. See you next time.
The ComedySportz Podcast is an independent production made by CSz players. The views and opinions expressed by the podcast host and any guests are their own and do not represent the views and opinions of any CSz location or CSz Worldwide. Vocabulary used by the host and guests is not necessarily representative of the CSz brand.